Hi. Bookends of life, if you ever thought about it. Ecclesiastes 3, the theme seems to be birth and death. So to everything there is a season and a time and every purpose under heaven. It's a time to be born and a time to die. Welcome to walking through Ecclesiastes 3. Well, now this isn't a walk through each word and analyzing it with the Hebrew scriptures and to figure out if it was actually Solomon who wrote the book or later in time period, as some things seem to indicate. We aren't here to discuss the way it fits into wisdom literature of the Old Testament. We're just simply here to gain a few insights from what living, really living, means as a Christian and to try to make a difference in our week. It's the beginning of the year and it seems to be a good time to focus on changing some things, and truly living could be one of those great resolutions. I will try to give you some insights into making your life come alive, not just be a deadbeat life. So here we go. The theme of Ecclesiastes 3 seems to be seasons of life, and we begin with, well, the beginning, birth. The theme of life. Do you have one? A theme is an underlying idea that reoccurs and pervades a work of art or literature. We just finished a holiday. There was a reoccurring idea that went with this holiday. Red, white, green, tinsel, wreaths, wrapping, cookies. So do you have a theme for your life? What is the underlying idea that weaves its way through your heart? That's what Solomon wants to get through to us. The focus of this book is living, really living, in a confusing world and not being caught up in it. To have a theme to your life so you don't have that empty pit of vanity. The book begins and ends with that phrase, vanity of vanities, in chapter 1 and then again in chapter 12. Without a theme that has meaning, it's worthless to try to discover meaning in stuff and accomplishments. What Solomon is getting at is the theme of your life should be God-focused. Anything you do is worthless without God being your theme. So let's jump into chapter 3. For everything there is a season and a time for every matter under heaven. There's a time for the natural parts of life to come and go in a pattern, and we call them seasons. Seasons in our natural world go with the flow of weather patterns. We don't plant corn in December, and we don't try to pick corn in July. The season dictates when we do things in life. It's also like that with our lives. We have seasons, so maybe some call it infancy, and then childhood, and then teenage years, and college, and 20s, and 30s, and families, middle age, empty nesters, retired, aging. All of those are seasons in our lives, and some people just seem to want to rush through the seasons and live where they don't belong. It's a part of our human tendency to rush one thing and try to hold on to another thing. The writer of Solomon uses natural things in life that are the hands of God. Birth and death are totally in the hands of God. None of us can or would want to control either one. You have no choice to be born. You had no choice where you were born, to whom you were born, and when you entered this world. Your parents didn't really have a plan either. They thought they had a plan, but approximately 1 million sperm head from one egg. That's Russian roulette. Even as an expecting mom, I really had no choice when the baby came. Oh, I wanted to, but it wasn't up to me. They came when they needed to. God has a lot to say about birth and life. Jeremiah 1:5, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. And then Psalms 139, 13 through 16, for you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. So how many of you remember your birth? My kids have heard their birth stories. I really don't talk about their birth stories much with people who've had challenging births because mine were fairly easy. I didn't have contractions for 36 hours and pushed for another 12. In fact, one child came out in one push. Birthing stories seem to be on mom's minds because of the intensity of the experience. The child, however, remembers nothing. So birth, we have stories, and we have days that we celebrate to remember our birth. But how do we look at it with God's eyes? Let's take a look at the definition of birth. Birth is the act or process of bearing or bringing forth offspring. So in mammals, the process is initiated by hormones which cause the muscular walls of the uterus to contract, expelling the fetus at the developmental stage when it is ready to feed and breathe. Thanks, Wikipedia. Birth is bringing another one of your kind into the world as a living person being independent of you. So I remember when our fourth child was born, and not necessarily was more intense than the others, but Jim's sister brought Adley and Tyler up to the hospital, and Tyler crawled up on the hospital bed beside me, and suddenly this little tiny 18-month-old kid that I'd left at home when I went to go have the baby looked like he was grown up. And we were talking to him, and Adley was over with the nurse and fussing with the baby. Tyler kept looking at me, very, very puzzled. Well, we had always talked about the baby and then pointed to my belly. Now we were talking about the baby and pointing to a funny-looking glass basket that had noise coming from it. We would say the word baby, and Tyler would look at my stomach, which was a little less than it had been, and he was puzzled. That's birth. It is a puzzling experience. But what birth does is begin the living process. It's the point where life begins. As much as we would like to dress a baby, take pictures of a baby, hold the baby, none of that is possible without birthing. Jesus used that word to describe our beginning of our spiritual life, birth. In John, the ruler came to Jesus and was told to enter the kingdom, he must be born again. It was something that those who heard Jesus say this could relate to. Things change when you're born. Things change when you're born again. It was the beginning of a new approach, a spiritual life. Babies and birthing have wonderful, exhilarating moments, but there's also stress. Babies are stressful. A baby brings great joy to a family, but there's also stress when babies are born and you put in the equation a single mom, a teenage mom, a special needs baby, illness or trauma. That all brings stress. Those idyllic moments of sitting on the bed looking at the baby sleeping, it's just a dream. Because you might get a baby with colic or postpartum depression or no money to pay the bill. So how do we take birth and applaud those who choose to bring a child into the world? How do we come along a single mom that's overwhelmed? How do we use birth to walk alongside somebody and be Jesus? And how can we use that comparison that Jesus gave us to being spiritual life with being reborn? There's a time to be born and we have no choice. But we have a choice with our spiritual birth. And that brings us to the other bookend, death. Death, the word itself, sounds scary. The definition from Webster is a permanent cessation of all vital functions, the end of life. Death is mentioned in the Bible a lot of times. Death is something we face with mixed feelings. We're promised heaven, and as a believer, we know that. But it's hard to leave what we know and understand, and we know and understand earth. The afterlife is the unknown, and yet we don't have a choice. Death is 100% guaranteed. So think about the interesting things we do when someone dies. We put up a stone and put the birth date on one end and the death date on the other. And then there's a dash. For my mother, it says 1935 to 2017. Well, what happened in that dash? I happened, for one thing. We can't control our beginning or our ending, but we can control what happens in the dash. For some, they just make a quick slash and leave this world without a reason to wonder what happened. For others, they want their dash to be thick and wide and full of things. So let's look at the verses that give us a bigger picture of birth and death and the two inevitables in life that we just can't control. Ecclesiastes 1:4, generations come and generations go. Translated, people are born and people die. Ecclesiastes 3:20, all go to the same place, all come to dust, and dust all return. Translated, people are born and people die. Ecclesiastes 7:1, a good name is better than fine perfume, and the day of death better than the day of birth. Translated, death comes just as unpredictable as birth, and it's going to come. Ecclesiastes 11:5, as you do not know the path of the wind or how the body is formed in a mother's womb. Translated, people are born and we just don't understand how. And then Genesis 21:2, Sarah became pregnant and bore a son to Abraham in his old age, at the very time God had promised him. Translated, we are born when God decides, and we have no control over it. So the bookends of life we don't have control over, but we do have input on the dash. So what really determines life? Have you ever thought about it? I remember going to the doctor when I knew we were pregnant, and the thing that put me over the top wasn't that cold contraption they shove up you know where, or the glucose test, or the peeing in a cup. What sent me shivering with excitement was hearing the heartbeat. Heartbeat means there's life. If you have had the honor of being beside someone passing, or even you watch it in the movies, what do they check for before determining someone has passed? You're right, the heartbeat. Our pulse within our body is very much like our spirit and the soul. The absence of the heartbeat means we're dead. The absence of our spirit equates our soul to God who gave it. But what happens when our spirit seems to be gone and we're not dead yet? COVID seems to have done that. Our heart is beating, but our spirit lives in a puddle at the bottom of the kitchen cupboard. We lose our desire to widen our dash because we quit reaching for our pulse. Life has a way of taking the oomph right out of us, and especially this year, life zaps our strength and we feel like we're walking zombies. Now, zombies, I actually had to look up in the dictionary. Zombie means a will-less, speechless human that has been dead and supernaturally reanimated, but not alive. So, if we don't want to be a zombie, how can we truly live the definition of which means having brain activity, and an example of living is a social person who is enjoying the fruits of life? Then how do we live? How do we widen our dash, fill our dash, and enjoy life when life seems to have just shoved us in a corner, taken away the things that bring us happiness and thrill our hearts? Well, I believe God wants us to take the definition of living and let God open our eyes to His definition of living. We as humans have the breath of life within us, not just a pulse and a brain activity. Let's go back to Moses' third address to his people in Deuteronomy 29. He's reminding them of the covenant they had made with God. I have set before you life and death, blessings and cursings. Therefore, choose life that both you and your descendants may live, that you may love the Lord your God, that you may obey His voice, that you may cling to Him, for He is your life and the length of your days. This helps me see how I can approach the frustrations of life and make a choice. Choose not only to embrace whatever life I've been given, but also to understand that it's not just about me and those I influence, and it's for those I love, and it's for those I don't know yet, and people that I haven't become friends with. It's all the people that need to see me living so they know how to live. I need to be an example, one that reflects an honorable life, not a grumpy old lady mad at the world. We have enough of them already. I'm alive. I have brain activity. I have a pulse. I have a choice. So the bigger question awaits, what do I do when I feel like the Spirit's left me? When I don't seem to know how to enjoy the fruits of life anymore because of either what's happened or what is happening or my fear of what could happen? I want to encourage you to think about 4 things to do when you feel the Spirit has left your heart. Check your pulse. Get your heart rate up. Feed yourself heart-healthy food and exercise. Okay, now we've all known people who've had heart attacks, clogged arteries, heart arrhythmia, and other medical issues that affect the heart. They get immediate attention because the heart is the essence of life. Well, our spiritual heart is the essence of our faith walk. So, a few things to think about. Our heart rate varies, just like the human heart. Quit comparing yourself to others. Your heart rate is different than anyone else's. What drives you is different. What motivates you is different. What depresses you is different. Quit looking at others' heart monitors. Our pulse is lower when we're just sitting still. If we're up and about, working and doing something, it rises. So, secondly, get your heart rate up. That equates to getting off your chair and doing something. Activity raises the heart rate physically. It's also being alive and radiantly sharing our faith that increases our heart rate spiritually. Activity is important as the heart pumps blood throughout the body and gets the blood to all the different places so our bodies work better. Move, not just in a physical sense, but in a spiritual sense. Next, eat heart healthy. Now don't get excited because I don't mean food. What you put into your mind and your soul and your heart makes you. Just as a bag of Doritos, a box of Ho-Hos, and a 12-pack of Mountain Dew does not equate to a well-rounded lunch, although you will be well-rounded. In a spiritual and mental diet, watching TV, reading Harlequin romances, and wishing you were Johanna Gaines doesn't grow your mind and widen your dash. Make an intentional plan about what you're going to ingest into your mind. You know what sets you off. You know who sets you off. Some of the who you can't avoid, but you can avoid much of the what. In this age of technology, you can listen to podcasts, you can watch and take in church services, listen to Christian speakers and music 24/7. Not that you should, because sleep is good, but you could. What goes in comes out. Make sure what you put in feeds your spiritual heart and your soul, so that what comes out nurtures others. And lastly, I know you're excited about this, exercise. Now, if you have a heart issue, you know that rehab is huge, and continuing exercise as a natural part of your life is a key to you even just surviving. So is serving. It is the exercise of the believer. Serving means you're doing something for others that you would love to have done for you. Just as the exercise program for you might be different for me, so will your serving. The hardest part is just determining, I'm going to go serve. Well, you can't lengthen your dash, but you can widen it by seizing the life God has given you and making it worth his effort. One of my life verses is Galatians 6:10. Therefore, as we have opportunity, let us do good to all, especially to those who are of the household of faith. Let's finish this by going back to Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 12. I know that there is nothing better for people than to be happy and do good while they live. Translated, while you're breathing and your heart is beating, you have the chance to be happy and love others. Don't blow the chance to give others a breath of fresh air and encourage them. While you're breathing and while your heart is beating, let God move you to love others on the face of this earth. Don't forget to feel for your pulse. Don't forget to put good things into your mind. And don't forget to love other people. Have a good one. So I've tried to put together some things to think about, questions to answer, things that take what I talked about just a little step farther. So one of the first questions is really think about what happens during birth. Now, relate that spiritually. What should happen during our spiritual birth? It should be a change. Think about when a baby grows that first year of life. Now think about your spiritual growth. You have some growing up to do. I know when we haven't seen a baby for a while and we go visit, first thing say is, oh, how much you've grown. And it even gets up to maybe up to 10, 12, 13. You'd see somebody you haven't seen for a while and it's like, wow, you've really grown. Are people saying that about us spiritually? Are we growing to where people notice it, or are we just getting by and existing? Growth is inevitable. If there's no growth, you're going backwards, and then that's just sitting on the vine waiting to be uprooted. So think about that. What really happens during birth? There is a dramatic change. And then growth happens. Are we growing spiritually? Second question is, how do we come along and help others in a culture today, especially when we think about unplanned pregnancies, teenage moms, and abortion? That's birth with stress. We have families with children that have special needs. We have families with kids now in COVID that are trying to teach their kids at home and trying to handle this, and then they have a new baby. Even though it's a huge blessing, it is stress. So how can we come along and help others in our culture? And even in the midst of COVID, how can we come along and talk Jesus through our actions? Sometimes it's as simple as a meal for a family, or dropping by some fun stuff for the kids. If you're able, go pick up people's kids that are overwhelmed. Take them, make cookies, or go to their house and just love on them. I remember when my first was born, I had all the help in the world because it's my first child. And then every child after that, oh, who cares? And Bailey was the last one, and all of my children came early. Wonderful blessing. And I had it all planned because my brother was graduating from John Brown University and everybody was going to be there. My mother, my sister, it's just going to, So I would have this baby 2 weeks early. And then I would go with them, take the other 2 kids. I would have help. It would be great. Didn't happen. So she didn't come and she didn't come and she didn't come. And then the contract, when I signed up to be a mom, 9 months, that's it. So finally here I am all alone in Minnesota. Well, I had a husband, but he's planting corn. End of discussion. So called the doctor, said, I want this kid out. Well, you can't because we're full. So if I went into labor, I could come in. Well, I didn't. So Monday went in and said, okay, I'm kicking her out. And got him off the tractor and we went and kicked her out. Came back, dropped me off with 3 under 5 and 1 was a newborn. And my friend, my mother felt sorry for me. She just called her friend and said, can you just go over and help Marette? Because she's got 3 kids under 5. And just was kind of funny because when I thought back about it, she came and spent some time and loved it. She didn't do much. She sat and held the baby, which is what everybody does. But it was somebody being there. Somebody to talk. We folded laundry. We laughed. Sometimes just coming along someone with your presence is just the boost to their spiritual heart to give them that life that they need. Third question, how can we help beginning life, whether it's birth or rebirth? So we've kind of talked about, helping people that got all these kids running around or people that are struggling with buying some groceries. But how can we help with a rebirth? How do we help someone who has placed their faith in Christ? How do we help someone grow as a Christian? You think back about the ways that a child grows. How do we help people grow that way spiritually? Notes, encouragement, Bible study, time with them, praying with them. The same kind of thing you do to a child. You love them, you nurture them, you tell them stories, you play, you sit on the floor and play games. You do things together. That helps a child grow, knowing they're loved and cared for. That's how it helps new Christians grow, knowing they're loved and cared for. So think about it. How would we celebrate a birthday if we looked at life through God's eyes? Would we make a cake? Maybe when we go through our celebrations of birthdays, could we possibly spend more time focusing on the God who made us, created us, who we created other people? Birthdays are a lot of focus on the one who's turning the age. What if we spun it to the God who created the life? And what's our focus if we look at life through God's eyes? What would our focus be? Just something to think about. Number 5, what does death do to planned lives? Now there's a few of us that get really into planning out things. Love plans, love details. But death kind of stops all those plans. It kind of just puts our planning life on hold. How can we live life as an anticipation of going to heaven and not being here forever? How would our plans change? Something to think about. Number 6, how do we respect death? We respect life with birthday cards and everything. How do we respect death? Now, a lot of us have celebrations. We still celebrate our little baby that died. It's been 29 years now. We still have a birthday cake. We still thank God for the life we were given, though we don't have custody on earth. He's in heaven. But how can we respect death? There's something about sending people notes to commemorate, to say I'm sorry. We do memorials. We donate to causes. But do we send a note and tell people, thank you for letting me share their life? Thank you for blessing me with the presence of your loved one? Just something to think about. And lastly, in the dying mentality, we are dying the second we're born. How should that encourage us to live? So just some questions for extra thought. Hope you have a great week, and I hope this has challenged you to truly live and make your dash awesome.